I'm Aubrey Sitterson, and this is SKALD. You're about to hear a chapter of my ongoing fantasy narrative. I wrote it to be heard, not read, and there's no music, sound effects, or character actors. It's all me, and I do it in one single, flawless take. SKALD picks up right where we left off last time, so if you haven't listened before, you might want to check out what you've missed before moving ahead. Or you can just jump right into the deep end. It's up to you. This isn't me reading you a story. This is me telling you a story. This is SKALD, Part 12. As child and cub, Maul and Skogg had run through the forest happy, carefree, still possessed of that dangerous myth. The one that parents tell their children, hoping that it will hold true for their progeny, even though it never did for them. The pernicious lie that right will prevail, that struggle is honorable, and that you will get what you deserve. But back then, with their feet digging down into the soft, dark dirt, rich with the millennia-long cycle of growth and decay that made that ancient forest dark, quiet, and wise, they still had confidence in the myth. And that confidence comforted them as they gorged themselves on wild fruits, then sprawled out in the moss, Maul's head resting on Skogg's warm, furry body as he gazed up at the heavy branches, wondering if the trees in his kingdom were any different from those of the elf realm. Now, once again, Maul and Skogg laid on the forest floor together, feeling the effects of their meal. Sweet lavender berries that they had hungrily devoured. But instead of warmth and satisfaction, Maul felt only agony, as his stomach clenched and heaved, a pitchfork stuck in his intestines, twisting, turning, winding them up to the point where he was sure that they would burst. The treacherous fruit had begun to tear the savage's body apart from the inside while he struggled, trapped within his own dreams, and now they aimed to finish the job. Maul writhed in pain. His suffering shook him to his core, not just because of the interminable pangs racking his abdomen, but from the knowledge that Skogg, his companion, the only creature who had never betrayed him, never expected him to be something that he was not, that she lay there, just out of reach, eyes glazed over, motionless. Do you wish for my assistance? The monk looked down at Maul, his face a blank slate. The savage groaned in response. Yes. Yes, of course. What kind of question is that? A grin perked up the edges of the monk's mouth. Considering that most those who eat the doomberries do so to welcome death, it's a rather fair one, I suppose. Cowards! Cowards! A lot of them! Do I look like a coward to you? No. You look like something else entirely. The monk began to kneel down next to the agonized brute, his eyes scanning Maul's body, but lingering imperceptibly longer upon the twisted alabaster horn still tied around his neck. Maul's focus was elsewhere, however, and he clumsily waved the monk away, tears welling up in his eyes from the pain and from the overwhelming panic and concern that he had for Skogg. No, I'm fine. I'm fine. Her, please. Tend to her first. The smile pulled the corners of the monk's mouth up a bit more. Looks can be deceiving, I suppose. Maul watched in expectant, anxious terror as the monk turned to face Skogg. His eyes rolled back into his head, communing with some unseen force. Then he forcefully placed his hands upon Skogg's exposed, distended belly, pushing up underneath her ribcage. In a moment laden with concern, both for his companion as well as his inability to do anything if the monk behaved falsely, Maul watched in amazement as Skogg's eyes began to blink, her legs to twitch and spasm violently before her mighty jaws opened up, expelling a gargantuan amount of bile with undigested chunks of the doomberries, staring up angrily from within. Skogg pushed herself to her feet. Then the massive beast leapt back in fright as those huge yellow eyes focused upon the monk, still kneeling next to her. The monk turned to face Maul, his countenance taking on a sickly, slightly green pallor. The fire burns inside me still. It can flush out the sickness. The monk wiped some foul spittle away from the corner of his mouth, and then laid his hands upon Maul. Brace yourself. Maul's head lolled back as the monk's hands touched his abdomen, those mysterious flames coursing through his body. But as the monk pressed upward beneath Maul's ribcage, that unseen, searing fire became the least of his concerns. He noticed the brand on the monk's neck for the first time, then watched in confused horror as it began to glow unnaturally. Before Maul could say a word, his mind was overcome with darkness. It was not the darkness of the underneath, not even that of the beautiful void of nothingness. Darker, deeper, colder than cold, more than even that, this abyss yawned before him, and it consumed him. It shook Maul to his core, made him feel ways that he had never experienced, ways that he had only felt in his most dreadful nightmares. Maul opened his mouth to scream in terror, to plead for rescue, to beg for release, his jaws opened so wide as to unhinge themselves from his head, with that darkness roiling inside him, ready to tear through his very flesh, if not provided a way out. As consciousness came rushing back to Maul's shattered brain, the doomberries and the fetid ichor of their handiwork came rushing up from his gut, tearing through his esophagus like hot knives before bursting out through his mouth, staining the pristine white snow that Maul laid upon. Maul spared no breath for thanks, and instead he began shoveling handfuls of clean snow into his sullied mouth, a desperate attempt to wash the foul taste of near death from his lips. So, what are you running from? The monk sat back upon the ground, motioning to Skogg, who continued to eye him warily. What? What? I run from nothing. There's no reason to come here unless you're trying to get away from something, especially with no food, no water, no fire. Monk eyed the horn once again, hanging from Maul's lowered neck, almost brushing the icy crust of the snow. No provisions at all to speak of. Maul whirled on the monk, chunks of snow and ice in his frozen hair, eyes wild, a fearsome sight. I run from no man. Ah, a woman then. The monk's creeping smile finally burst into the full-on laugh it had been threatening since Maul awoke. I can't say I blame you. Maul stared daggers at the monk, doing the only math he knew, the grim, bloody arithmetic of combat and its consequences. He didn't like the monk's tone, his insinuations, or even that happy smile. The monk was skinny, frail almost, with no visible weapon. But he had saved Maul and Skogg both, and done so with some power that was beyond Maul's ken. So the savage choked down his savage rage. What does a monk know of women? I am a monk no longer, my friend. For better or for worse, I suppose. Maul pushed himself up, taking a better vantage. What did you do wrong? The monk laughed as he stood. A man should lean into what he is, lean into his strengths. And though you appear to have many, wordplay and interrogation, they are not among them. He extended his hand, palm up, to put the warrior at ease. My name is Xylan. Maul. King Maul. He took the monk's hand, shocked by the reserves of strength that those sinewy limbs contained. True king of the realm of men. Xylan seemed unfazed by Maul's royal claim, keeping his eyes locked on that long, twisting alabaster horn as he spoke. And where do your royal travels take you now, my king? Maul, feeling Xylan's dark, clever eyes weighing heavily on the horn, took it and slid it down inside his leather jerkin. I seek the College of Dreams, or someone who can direct me to it. Well, you've already achieved the latter. In fact, I happen to be going that way myself, and I would be glad of a companion. Despite the anxious growl emitted by Skogg, Maul cautiously assented. You saved the both of us. We owe you at least that much in return. Perhaps the fates have begun to smile upon us. Xylan turned and set off into the woods, leaving Maul and Skogg to follow behind. I would travel many miles, my king. Many, many miles. But I wouldn't go that far. They walked south, Maul and Xylan side by side, with Skogg skulking behind, occasionally taking leave to scout the wilderness that surrounded them. Initially, they kept silent to match with the complete lack of noise coming out of that frozen domain, the one that had been guarded by the horn, now pressed against Maul's torso. But soon, they escaped from that desolate, frozen realm, and that it was still bitter, bitter cold, with Maul warmed only by his boiling rage, and Xylan by the burning black fire within him. The frigid otherworldliness had lifted, and soon they could hear birds in the trees above. At around midday, with the realm's dual suns staring down upon them like a pair of angry eyes, with the snow noticeably wetter, the trees visibly less barren, Skogg erupted from the brush, rushing to Maul's feet, where she deposited a pile of fat bird carcasses. The King of Men reached out his hand, scratching Skogg behind the ears, the spot she loved, the one that caused her to lean into the savage's thick, calloused fingers. After this simple gesture of thanks, Maul snatched up one of the birds. He went to bite the head, but Xylan's hand reached out to stop him. My king, you would eat your meal raw? Maul, a ravenous dog denied his bone, had to struggle not to snap, his lip curling up over his teeth. It couldn't be any worse than the doomberries. The monk laughed. I suppose not, but if you'll allow me, I could start a cook fire. You keep a tinderbox hidden in those robes? No, not exactly. Help me gather some wood. I'll show you. When the wood, as dry as they could find, was set, Maul worked at building a makeshift spit, doing the best he could with no blade and only the bluntest of instruments: his hands. As he worked, he saw Xylan reach into his robes and pull out a small, circular piece of glass, which he positioned beneath those dual suns, and above the kindling at the center of their mean fire pit, the snow cleared in a small circular patch. As the dual suns beat down, Xylan began to hum, almost inaudibly, some complex language that Maul could not wrap his brain around. The monk's eyes rolled back into his head once again, exposing their veiny whites, and as the brand on Xylan's neck began to glow, so too did the kindling that they had gathered. Maul watched carefully, suspiciously, as Skogg laid off to the side, devouring her raw bird, and before he knew it, the kindling had taken fully, flames rising up and licking hungrily at the wood placed above and around the fire. As the fire grew, however, Maul could swear that he saw, amidst the shifting oranges, reds, and yellows, something darker. And though the fire cooked those wild birds, roasting them in their own juices, Maul noticed that it emitted far less heat than he would have expected from such a blaze. Maul was not surprised at the speed at which he devoured the bird, but he was shocked and a little impressed at how quickly Xylan had made work of his meal. The monk was at least as starved as Maul. They would ask Skogg to catch something larger for their dinner. Though there was nothing left to eat, the three sat around the fire for a moment longer, resting up for the continued march that would comprise the rest of their day. So, tell me about your kingdom, my king. What do you wish to know? Anything. Everything. I've never been to the realm of men. When did you first take leave of it? I didn't leave. I was taken. When I was but a baby, stolen from my throne. A baby? A baby with a throne? Xylan was surprised. Do you know much about your kingdom? I know enough. I know that strength is valued and rewarded there, and I know that my throne, the one you mock, waits for me still. But how do you know this? How do you know anything about the realm? That it's even still there? If you were a baby, you couldn't possibly remember. I don't need to remember. I know. I know that it is mine and that I will have it. That is all I need to know. So, this realm, one you can't remember seeing, one where time no doubt moves very differently than here, how can you be so convinced it's as eager for your return as you are? It doesn't matter if the realm is eager or even ready for me. The throne at its head is mine. It is meant for me. It has always been mine, and I will take it from whatever usurper now sits upon it. It matters not what the realm is, what I remember of it, or how it feels. It matters only to whom it belongs. Me. Are you too blind to see that? I can see quite clearly. But it seems to me that you're after something you can't see or touch, something you don't even know, something that might not even exist. You're in search of an idea, Maul, not anything real. And when you reach out to grab something that isn't real, you often come up empty-handed. Maul stood up suddenly, as he had finally had his fill of the monk's clever talk. It's King Maul. And it seems to me that you might be showing your true colors, that you're the same as all the others, the ones who would slide whatever lies they could into my ears to keep me away from what is mine. Do you have an angle to play? A goal of your own? Is that why you weave your lies? Maul pulled out his cudgel, and the monk's ever-watchful eyes saw something strange upon the dead branch. A small sprout from which emerged two tiny green leaves. Maul, in his rage, however, saw nothing but red. I have suffered much from you already, for it's true. You saved our lives, both of them. But I will not willingly travel with a liar. Is that clear? Xylan, despite the unspoken but still very clear threats laid out by his traveling companion, remained upon the ground, reclining serenely as he smiled up at Maul. They were idle thoughts, my king, nothing more. And if you know them to be false, why are you so angry? Maul kicked the fire, scattering the now dying coals, sending sparks up at Xylan's face, which the monk deftly covered. Because I know what is true and what is right, and I am sick to death of being told otherwise. I can see that now. I can see that very clearly. I can also see the dual suns lowering, and since our fire has gone out, Perhaps it's best we keep moving. For the rest of the day, Maul and Xylan traveled quickly, but with not a word spoken between them. Maul simmered, enraged, and further enraged that he couldn't put words to what had made him so mad about his exchange with the monk, and even further enraged that Xylan seemed unconcerned about Maul, Skogg, or anything else. The temperature rose quickly as they headed south, and the snow had been reduced to intermittent patches upon the ground. Xylan's spirits seemed to improve with the climate, and the monk began to whistle. Maul hated that his companion was so happy, especially after their fight. There was something about the tune that soothed him in spite of himself. When the dual suns set, the two were still on the move, allowing the moon and stars to guide their path through the ancient forest. It was getting late. They'd need to camp soon, but Xylan appeared indefatigable, and Maul would be damned if he admitted that he had been tired before that skinny monk. And besides, Skogg was still off ranging on an impossible hunt for prey large enough to sate all their hungers. Maul wasn't sure when the bells started, as they seemed to meld with Xylan's whistle, at least at first, calming him, guiding him through the forest. But those sweet harmonies soon became dissonant as the bells began to ring out in a cacophonous din, one that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, all at once. Maul put a hand to his head. Xylan, what is... But before he could finish his question, the words were sucked from his mouth. The air pulled from his lungs. Maul found himself surrounded by an unseen presence, inundated with lights that blinked on the edge of his vision. Wisps. Maul croaked as he pulled out his cudgel, but though he swung hard and fast, the club passed through the air as if there was nothing there at all. Because there wasn't. Maul turned to Xylan and saw that between his whistling, the glowing brand on his neck, and some arcane hand motions, the monk was able to keep the invisible lights at bay. Calm yourself. Relax. Don't make this any more painful or difficult than it needs to be. But Maul couldn't just relax. He would not lay down and accept whatever these wisps had planned for him. He flailed his arms and he sucked wildly for breath. Help me! True salvation cannot ever come from without. Maul summoned up what little air was left in his lungs, expelling it out in pained speech. By whatever god you serve, do something! The monk allowed a mocking smile to steal across his lips. My king, I thought you already knew. There are no gods. If you enjoy SKALD, please leave a good review on iTunes, Stitcher, or preferably both. Good reviews get more people listening to the podcast, so really, you're doing a favor for me and all those future SKALD fans. Plus, I might even read your review on the show. Bro Mike 666 on iTunes keeps it simple and straightforward, saying, I had to remember to breathe. SKALD is here waiting for you every Thursday morning, but if you want that to continue to be the case, you need to support the show on Patreon. It's safe, secure, and easy, with the dollar amount you choose deducted from your credit card at the end of each month. Plus, if you pledge $7 or more, I'll follow you on Twitter so we can chat about fantasy, Dungeons & Dragons, heavy metal, whatever else you want. To sign up, or for more information, head to patreon.com/skald. I am super easy to find online. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they're all Aubrey Sitterson. AubreySitterson. No spaces, no numbers. Or head over to my website, aubreysitterson.com, spelled the same way, for links to everything, including social media, my non-SKALD related projects, comics, podcasts, t-shirts, credits, bio and contact information. Finally, if you're enjoying SKALD, please tell everyone you can. Your positive word of mouth is crucial to keeping the show going and growing. Thanks for listening. I'll talk at you next week.